Welcome to Behind the Case podcast, a podcast that focuses on navigating the challenges our clients face with divorce and family law in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Behind the Case is brought to you by the Turner-Monahan legal team. With over 70 years of collective experience in divorce and family law. Together, Tyler Monahan, Keaton Monahan, Tina Campbell, and the Turner-Monahan team will discuss real-life cases, answer questions, and explore family law areas from divorce to child custody. Our goal is to clarify scenarios and demystify legal jargon, making the process less daunting and reminding you that you're not alone. So sit back and let's discuss what happens behind the case.
Do military spouses have special rights during a divorce?
No, not special rights. No more rights than anyone else in a divorce would have.
What happens to military pension and retirement accounts in a divorce?
Well, that can be very complicated. It's going to depend on the years of service of the military member. It's going to depend on the length of the marriage and what branch the individual's in, whether they're active duty, whether they're in reserves, and those kinds of things. So once we get into the really specifics of those details, oftentimes, because Heather and I don't necessarily keep updated with what DFAS does in regards to those things, we will contact someone who is a little bit more of a military expert to get those. But military retirement and other benefits are certainly divisible. And there are different benefits allotted to the former spouse depending on the years of service and the years of the marriage. So it can be very detailed.
Can deployment affect who gets custody of the kids?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because, obviously, if the military member is going to be deployed to a foreign country for an extended period of time or into a war zone or into a militarized zone, then obviously it's going to make it a very different perspective for the child. You're not going to want the child to be able to go to those particular locations. But there's additional visitation schedules and things that are put into place that are specifically designed for military members and their families so that they can also have some access to the kiddos.
Does the military provide legal support in divorce cases?
Yes, they do. There is a unit at every military base. There's a JAG officer that usually one of them specializes in the family law division for custody and things like that. However, I can tell you that a lot of times they do recommend that they seek outside counsel because either that JAG officer, which is an attorney that is also a military personnel, may not be familiar with the particular court that they're in and certainly not familiar with the judges. So while they can give basic legal advice, I haven't had a divorce case or a custody case where the military JAG officer actually did represent the military personnel in the proceedings.
Yeah, I've had the exact same experience. They can go to a JAG office to get basic information, but JAG officers are not necessarily licensed in the particular state that they're deployed in at that particular moment. So that particular officer may not be well versed in Texas law. So they will give the basics. And the JAG office and the military all have specific guidelines for their members who are going through divorce, but those guidelines are not necessarily the same as the state law that is being applied. So the military member would absolutely need to seek local counsel in order to get some more specific advice on how things would go.
How is jurisdiction decided if the family is constantly moving?
Well, if they're constantly moving, that does cause a problem. However, usually the military personnel is going to be stationed in a location for a year at minimum. I haven't seen anyone that has been stationed at a shorter time period than that. But also, the military personnel is going to have a home state, a home base through the military, whether that is where they have a resident, where they were initially stationed. They'll have a home base. However, that can also cause a problem if there's no property owned in that state and neither party lives in that state. But wherever jurisdiction is going to lie, wherever the parties have lived, one or the other parties have lived for a period of 6 months or longer in that state and for a period of 90 days in a particular county.
What happens to healthcare benefits after divorce?
Again, that comes down to the military member's length of service and the length of marriage as to what the former spouse or children would be entitled to. If it's a long-term military member, then there is tiers and there is several different plans that could potentially be available where that former spouse may have continued coverage through the military because of the length of marriage. But those are, again, very specific questions, and those rules kind of change depending on the year. So we have to look that up through DFAS each time we go through one of these.
Do divorced spouses or service members get any housing or relocation benefits if they go through divorce?
Let's take a quick pause here. If you or someone you know is navigating divorce or family law matters in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, reach out to Turner-Monahan for a free legal consultation. Call us at 817-332-4477 or visit us at tumolaw.com. That's TUMOLAW.com for a free legal consultation. Now, let's get back to Behind the Case.
Not through the typical divorce courts. Now, that may be a benefit that is provided to the military members through the JAG office, because they do have lots of different things that they provide to the families that are not necessarily part of state law. So that is something that the family would need to discuss with the JAG office in particular to see if that's a specific benefit that is available in this particular location, because every base is going to be a little different. Every location is going to be a little different.
Can military pay or benefits be garnished for child support?
Yes, absolutely. And the military prefers that. They have their own punishments for military personnel that fall behind on child support. But if a military personnel, just like any other individual who is ordered to pay child support, fails to pay child support, then they can be held in contempt and can go to jail. And that is going to cause a big problem with the military personnel to act on their duties and to also, again, suffer some repercussions through the military.
And just on a side note, military members who are receiving VA disability, the VA disability itself cannot be withheld from, but that amount that the person receives is used in the calculation of their income to determine the child support amount. Same with BAH and BAS. Most military members receive some additional stipends on their pay for their cost of living and where they're at, and depending on which state they're in. And it oftentimes, in cases where that is a question, we are often questioned as to whether those particular funds are used in the calculation of support. Every dollar that is income is used in the calculation of support, even if we can't withhold from it. So oftentimes military members don't come right out and tell you about any disability benefits. And unless that question is asked, you don't know about it because it doesn't show up on income tax returns. It doesn't show up on anything else other than if you're reviewing their bank statements and you happen to see the direct deposits from the VA administration. So it does need to be recognized that all of those dollars do count towards child support, but only their current active pay or retirement can be withheld from, not any disability benefits.
What if one parent is stationed overseas during the custody disputes?
Well, I mean, that's going to cause a problem as far as service goes. Getting a military personnel served outside of the country is very difficult. So if the person who wants to modify the order is in the state of Texas, but the military personnel is outside or out of the country, it's going to cause a significant issue in service and moving forward. So then the question becomes, what is the particular modification that is requested? If we're requesting to modify child support, I understand the concern and the reason to want to do that, especially if the military personnel is receiving more income because they are stationed outside of the country. However, if you're wanting to modify anything such as possession and access or restrict possession and access, I would recommend that we wait to file that proceeding until the military personnel is back in the country.
Are military divorces handled faster or slower than civilian ones?
Same.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no difference in how quickly or how slowly something will happen just because there's a military member. I think the only thing that would be case specific for a military member is if there was a deployment or if there's training or something that takes the military member away from the area for an extended period of time. That could certainly slow it down, but that's no different than a traditional
Right.
divorce if somebody's sent on training for their job or they, get an illness and are unavailable for a period. But there is nothing that's specific to military members that would make a divorce any faster or slower.
Agreed.
You mentioned how if they don't pay child support, like the military in a way penalize, like they're very strict on it. Is there any other things in a divorce that a military member might be penalized for during a divorce?
I mean, the military very much expects its members to behave with a certain amount of respect and decorum when it comes to their families. So it is not unusual, or it has certainly happened in cases where a former spouse has contacted the sergeant or the first shirt for the military member to let them know that they're not visiting, or they've been disruptive, or they're drinking too much, or those kinds of things. And the military does take those complaints seriously. The problem is when you have a former spouse or a soon to be former spouse who's being vindictive and making those calls unnecessarily, that could actually put the military members' job in jeopardy, their future promotions in jeopardy, which in the end is a detriment to the potential former spouse, because if their income is diminished or they can't promote or they're even knocked down, then that affects the money that's available for the family. But the military does very much take great consideration in regards to their families and the former families of their members.
How does somebody that's in the military that lives in DFW contact you about going through a divorce?
They can reach us from our website at tumolaw.com, or they can also give us a call on our phones at 817-332-4477.
And how much does a consultation cost?
No fee for a consultation.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Behind the Case. If this episode offered insight or helped clarify some aspect of divorce and family law, we encourage you to subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. For those in the DFW area that are in need of a legal consultation, you can reach us at tumolaw.com. That's TUMOLAW.com, or 817-332-4477 to schedule a free legal consultation. Remember, the journey through legal matters can be complex, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Until our next discussion, take care. Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as legal advice. Listening to this podcast or contacting our team does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. For advice on your specific situation, please consult with a licensed attorney in your area.